Are we hiring for the company we have, or are we hiring for the company we want?
Oh, yikes. That's a can of worms you just opened. I think sometimes companies are actually hiring for the company they no longer are. Technology has only made the process more convoluted, longer, more frustrating. Your candidate is also often your customer. If we ever gave customers in a store the terrible, crappy service we're giving candidates, someone would be getting in trouble.
Last week, we got to talk about job ads through the eyes of both the candidate, but then also you as a store manager. Today, the natural progression, we actually kind of changed the flow of what we planned to do because it seemed to make sense then to follow up with the hiring experience. So specifically interviewing and applying and hiring, how that goes. If I have a goal for the episode, not that I like to set anything in stone because our conversations take us where they take us, and I think that's a good thing. But what I really want to do is hopefully connect, like make a very clear connection between how the specific things like this impact corporate's broader strategy. Every corporate retailer I've worked with has a big, bold business strategy, and that will always include something about their offering, something about the product itself, but always something about having the best people in a robust talent pipeline. And so I'm hoping that we can shed some light on how the current common hiring and interviewing experiences might be stalling their strategies, because I think that's what's going to make them pause and hopefully make some change.
I think for me, it's also about, to get a little bit more detailed and, micro focus in, is like how this impacts like retention, but also how the speed of the whole process impacts how candidates view a brand in general, which I know we'll talk about because I've said it a lot too, which is like your candidate is also often your customer. And the sort of customer service towards candidates is really lacking. Like if we ever gave customers in a store the terrible, crappy service we're giving candidates, I mean, the Google reviews would be bad and someone would be getting in trouble.
Right. Yeah, there's no candidate escalation team.
Yeah, no.
Okay. So I think it makes sense if we try to walk through the hiring process from basically like first click to first shift and look at it from all sides. So I know you have experience from a candidate perspective. I know you have store leader experience from this. And again, we'll try and connect the dots between why it should matter to a VP and what they might be able to do differently to make it better, which ultimately will again help them achieve the strategy that they've worked so hard on. So we talked about job ads a lot. I imagine the next step is preparing your resume and or applying online. Sometimes it's both. I know that's horrible, right? Like you submit your resume, but then you basically have to copy and paste each part of it into little sections on a web form.
I don't, because I see that you do that. Yeah. I don't care who you are. I'm not applying.
Lesson 1 right there. Okay, so how does it typically work? You've read a job ad, you've decided you wanted to apply. What do you do next?
Yeah, I mean, there's now one of the more nefarious things about the hiring process is now there's more ways than ever to hire, but no transparency to see which way you should be hiring or if the business even has a preference. Because now you can quick apply on LinkedIn. You can apply through Indeed, or you can apply directly through their website. I mean, if I could give candidates one piece of advice just right from the jump on this is, even if you see the ad on LinkedIn or see it on Indeed, don't click apply through there. Go to the company website, go all the way down to the careers page, who we are, what we do, all that jazz. Click 72 different buttons until you get to the job page and apply for the job there.
How come?
Because that's going more directly to someone.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so the process is basically that, choosing which avenue you're going to apply. And then depending on the company, there is a whole rigmarole of, hoops and loops to jump through in terms of like attaching your resume. Some places require a cover letter in 2025 that no one's going to read. And what's funny is I've twice just attached my resume again to that thing and have still gotten interviews. So I'm like, well, that's proof that no one read that. Good for you guys. Matt's little test, you failed. And then also just answering whatever standard, legal questions they have to ask. And then you get your little confirmation email and you wait.
What do you think happens to your resume next?
Well, it's really interesting because having seen it from a store manager side, one company I work for, you could see their availability because that was a question they had to answer. So you could see that, you could click their resume, but before you even clicked it, you saw literally like name and then days of the week and when they're available. And then I know for another platform I've used, it actually rated the candidate. Obviously, it's some sort of like algorithm AI something that's basically looking for keywords in the resume. And it's basically telling you like, this is like an 80% match or a 90% match. I will say clicking on it made me realize that those candidates, it's mostly a title match, quite frankly. So if you've applied for assistant manager and you've been an assistant manager multiple times, it's going to tell me you're a strong candidate. If you have roles where you were called something else, but you did that same job, it's going to tell me you're not really a match, even though you probably are. But yeah, I would say that every company is different in terms of how they throw it, but usually it's just one big mosh pit of papers to click through.
That was kind of my question is like, are you just playing the keyword game?
Mhm.
Or are you actually trying to write something personal and real that will turn a head, that will turn a human's head? And does it even really matter at this point? I mean, is a human reading these things?
I mean, I think for most companies in retail, a human is reading them,
Hmm.
but often based on a computer's first pass. Can't speak to all retailers, but I don't think anyone's like, I've heard people who are like, well, if you don't put this keyword, it's not going to make it through the system. And then your application is like gone or something.
Right.
And for legal reasons, I just know that can't be true because most companies, like when we had paper applications back in the day, I miss them terribly. Yes,
Mhm.
I am that person. Legally, most companies made you keep all applications for like a year or two for like legal reasons. So like your application does not just get like thrown into some like digital underworld that no one can
Right.
ever see. It's just whether, if there's leaders looking at like a job rec that has 50 applications and the computer said 10 were the best. I mean, if you were the 50th worst, yeah, maybe a human isn't seeing your application. It also depends on what quality of candidates are those top 10. Because sometimes the computer tells you, here are your top 10. And as someone who recently went through a lot of interviewing, those top 10 were not top 10 anything. And and some of the people who were rated poorly, one of whom I've hired, that the computer basically was like, don't bother with this person, is the perfect fit and amazing. So it really comes down to like, is the leader trusting too much in the tech? I think is what the question becomes.
Yeah, great point. What are your thoughts on applying in person?
So many companies don't even like allow that anymore. I think for like hourly candidates, a good store leader will pause what they're doing if someone walks in and either get them to apply right there, especially if like they walk in and like immediately like the vibes are good and you're like, oh, this person has energy. They took the effort to walk in here. Yeah, do you want to apply right now? Go to this website, click apply, and like, I mean, when I was at Starbucks, there were a couple of times that I was like, do you have 30 minutes now? Let's interview. Don't tell Starbucks because that's not allowed. But it's not that it's not allowed. It's that most places now want you to like have their application through the system. And again, it's all legal reasons, which begs me to ask the question, what are we 8 episodes in? Is this episode 8?
7.
7. So episode 7, it begs the question to me, episode 7, because it's come up so much. Who's running these companies? The C-suite or the lawyers? Because the more we talk about things, the more I'm like, wait, who's in charge? Because, at a lot of companies, you can't interview a candidate until they're in the system. Like it's a big no-no to interview someone who's not in the system. Maybe because I'm assuming for like, profiling reasons or,
Right.
discrimination reasons, but and so everything can be above board. But quite frankly, I'm not going to miss a great candidate who walks into my store with like excitement for the brand and the proactive nature that brought them into the store, especially in 2025 when it's so easy to sit behind a computer and click a button. Like you
Mhm.
walked in and are asking about a job. Like, I want to know you. Who are you? Let's chat. But what I've done previously, and I did actually do this at Starbucks, is I would basically interview them twice. I would do like a quick, like, okay, you're here, let's chat. And then like a go through the system and then we'll meet again. But that's going to be a little bit more unofficial at that point because like I'm not making you interview twice to tell you no. I just need to like do the thing. But yeah, I'm all for people walking in, but not every leader likes it. Some people act like it's an affront to nature when people do it.
Interesting. Okay. So my basic question probably at each point, at each stage in this process is going to be, is it finding the right people? And, we can talk about the right people. Are they found? Are they made? It's probably some combination of both. So
Mhm.
we're aware. But it sounds like to me, there's nothing wildly flawed about this particular small stage, except if the leader is over relying on the tech rankings and not
Mhm.
taking the time to review the actual applications.
Exactly.
The one thing I worked with a corporate retailer on their application experience with their UX designer too, and just please have a very clear end screen that acknowledges that the resume has been received. Because I can't tell you how often like we click through these things. I'm like, am I done? Did it work? Am I like, what is next? Give me some indication that it worked, that you received my application, and how long I should wait, or if I'm going to get a confirmation email or something. Just let
Mhm.
people know what to expect.
Yes.
That's my
Seems
small.
so simple, but yes.
So awesome. Okay, so what is phase two? Is it an interview invite?
Depends. It kind of depends on where I've worked, both for me as a candidate and as the hiring manager. Because if you're dealing with either a lot of candidates or you're looking for very specific things, you might actually try to like weed some people out via like email communication first. And actually, in my most current role, I really appreciated that they did that with a recruiter asking me a series of questions via email. And I got the sense that like they really cared about the answers, but also like I'm sure there are a bunch of people that get those questions in their inbox and they're like, I'm not doing another step of the process and don't do it. So like that helps you know like who's serious and who just like, you know, was wine drunk at 11 p.m. on a Thursday hating their job and just clicking easy apply on LinkedIn. Um because that's the other problem with making it easier to apply is you definitely get a lot more people who are unserious about the role or the job or the brand, etc. But yes, the next step would be like maybe a quick like screen to ask some clarifying questions. Like for me as the hiring manager, I put it in the same email sometimes like, do you understand XYZ? Like, is that something you're looking for? If yes, would love to meet with you. Here are the times.
Right. How about prep? How do you prep? Oh, let's start with you as a candidate.
Mhm.
What does your interview prep look like?
My interview prep looks like I'm going to know what your CEO ate for lunch last Tuesday. I'm going to know their dog's name, what grudges they hold from high school. I'm going down, I'm digging deep. I want to know everything. And for two reasons. One, I want to be prepared for the interview, but two, in doing that research, I want to love 95% of what I find. And because of the advent of podcasts, a lot of executive leaders and CEOs of companies have been at least on one episode of a podcast somewhere. And getting to listen to them is, even though I'm never going to interact with them, it tells me a lot about the brand, how they talk about their experience. And, you know, is it just some like CEO bro, like basically bragging on some podcast about like how he's like optimized his schedule and wakes up at 4 a.m. to like go to the gym and like eat clean. And that's how he performs best as a CEO? Because you can probably count me out if that's the case. But yeah, I really go on a deep dive as a candidate. I want to know everything there is to know about the brand, the culture, the values.
I'm kind of curious what resources you're provided as a hiring manager. So like, do you get guidance from, I don't know, corporate or whatever, your leader, whoever? Yeah. Okay.
The lawyers are involved, Becky.
Oh, it's the
They have
lawyers.
they have questions they need me to ask. But no, I have, in all seriousness, so some companies, like say a Starbucks, have very specific questions you have to ask. And then you have to take notes on the answers provided in the moment. So yeah, you have to like have your iMac out in front of the candidate's face and like be half engaged because you have to take notes. And then other companies have like, here are, you know, a bank of 30 questions that would be helpful. You don't have to ask them all, but like, here's
Okay.
what that looks like. And then obviously, I think every leader, well, I hope no, not every leader doesn't do this. Why am I saying this? I ask my own questions as well, but I don't think
Mhm.
all leaders do. I think they're like, okay, these are the 10 questions I got to ask. And I think depending on someone's experience, like there's more I want to know, and not so like, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah. When large retailers have big strategy changes, business strategy, do you hear about that at all as a store leader?
I would say once it's like finalized, yeah. Because it
Okay.
usually has like a snappy name, like
Yes.
Reinvigoration 2026.
Yes. Yes. It has a name. It has its own brand. It has like
Yeah,
a,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yes, we do hear.
Yes. And then does it ever get developed enough where it reaches you as a store manager when you're hiring to help you articulate these are the kind of people who we know we need to make this strategy come to fruition?
Interesting question, actually. I don't think anyone's tied that thread through.
Hmm.
I think sometimes you have like an implicit understanding of like, okay, this is the direction we're now heading. And in order to head in that direction, here's like the kind of skills and areas of focus that I need a candidate to have. And so you kind of make some loose connection, but I don't think a brand has ever like, and now we're doing like, you know, Reinvigoration 2019. And that
Hmm.
means, please look for candidates who are ready to reinvigorate the brand.
Well, it begs the question, are we hiring for the company we have, or are we hiring for the company we want? And maybe that's not a big gap for a lot of companies.
Oh, yikes. That's a can of worms you just opened. Because as you asked me that question, the thing that comes to mind is I think sometimes companies are actually hiring for the company they no longer are.
Same
So
here.
never mind hiring for the future. We're like hiring what we used to be because we haven't updated what we look for.
Yes.
But I wouldn't even say it's current sometimes. Sometimes it's like still behind. So then you're hiring people and then you're like, well, that's actually not. Now I need to train you to be something different.
Yes, this is exactly what I was trying to kind of like dig into, pinpoint. Because I think really what I would love to get across is the quality, right? Just to speak to the VPs who might be listening, the VP of HR, the VP of Ops, the quality of every quarter's results can quite literally start with the quality or the experience of every hire. So, I
Mhm.
mean, if you know you have this goal and you've taken the time to make people a huge part of this goal, every single business strategy I've seen in corporate retail includes this idea of the best people, like great talent, a destination employer, a robust pipeline, like diverse thinking, all these things.
Wow, I was just triggered. All those buzzwords.
And this is what operational engagement is all about, right? Is like making that strategy come to life through the things that happen day to day in retail. And that's kind of what I want to get to with this interviewing thing.
And I think my side tangent to
Yeah.
this is that companies just need to be faster about a lot of
Hmm.
things and more agile just in general. And I hear that word a lot in retail. Like we need to be more agile. We need to move quicker in the marketplace or whatever, corporate slogan makes everyone feel good about themselves at night. But my thing is like, so you've come up with this beautiful strategy, Reinvigoration 2019, and it has its own brand to your point.
Hmm.
And now we're launching it. But if you've changed none of the policies of the company, daily operations of the company, or who you're hiring, like nothing is actually going to change because it's just this poster you've slapped in the back room, which we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
And my thing is, I think the pressure, this is where I get a little bit tough on corporate employees because I think as a field employee, our turnaround time for a lot of things is very quick.
Yeah.
Like the expectation that we move with agility is, I mean, that's like it's in like every job ad. Speaking of which, like, are you agile?
Hmm.
Can you jump through many hoops? And so, like, we'll have a 48-hour turnaround time. And my question is, why doesn't the hiring team, the lawyers, whoever is involved in creating the job ad and creating the interview and who we want to hire, so you've come up with this brand strategy? I mean, why aren't you looking at that team as a C-suite employee and quite frankly being like, you have 1 week and I expect all of these documents to be changed because when we launch this in stores, we're changing how they do everything because we actually want change. Because that's what's missing. Because oftentimes what you'll hear is we have this new strategy, Reinvigoration 2019, and we are working on updating A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And in stores, sometimes you don't see those updates for 3 or 4 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, I'm like, and sometimes you get them and you're like, so you changed 2 interview questions and that took you 3 quarters? I mean, if that was me as a field employee, that wouldn't be an acceptable turnaround time. So I'd love to know why it's acceptable for you sitting at a desk. It's a real question I have.
Fair question. I wish we had a call-in number. What were the changes that you saw, even if it took 3 to 4 quarters later?
Can't remember specific things that were changed, but it was like so subtle, or it would be like a general, like, make sure you're looking for people who like want to grow with the brand. So then the questions would shift to more like about like, what does the future look like for you? Or, where do you hope to be or whatever? And so they would be subtle shifts like that. But it's like, and you think this is the groundbreaking, like, reinvigoration 2019? Come on.
Although I really like, to be fair, I'm heartened a little bit by that because like it is at least something making it into early in the employee experience where they're trying to check that like, yes, they want to make sure that this person wants what they plan to deliver.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I have a list of what I've labeled strategic interview questions. That's like, look, if you are interested in, if you're saying that your strategy relies on building a strong talent pipeline, ask people about a skill or role they want to learn and or grow into in the interview, that kind of thing. So even though I hear that like in isolation it's not enough to make a strategy come to life, but like God, something is heartening. All right, so I imagine the bulk of this conversation is going to be around interviews. Would you say that's kind of the biggest, most important, critical part of hiring? Okay. How, like, give me logistics just to jump off on. How many rounds is it typically? How does it work? Like it, hate it?
So for hourly employees, like hourly non-key holder employees in a store, it's typically 1 interview. And I'll go through them all and then I'll kind of go back through some details. So for that person 1, anyone with keys, it's usually 2. So like a store manager and then a district manager. Assistant managers, depending on the company, might have 3 interviews. So the store, the district, and then some other person. And then a store manager, the most common I find in my own experience is 3 or 4. So recruiter, DM, regional, and then that last one could be HR or a VP. It kind of depends on how big the company is and how many people they want involved in the process. I would argue that almost in every company, the last one is pointless because we all know you've made it. You have the job. Just cut out that person. They don't need to be involved. The VP of nothing needs to be involved with a store employee ever.
Interesting.
I think the question that we should train people to ask, like a DM, for example, or a regional is, would you send this to your VP or would you be embarrassed? And if you'd be embarrassed, let's just not move forward. And if you would send them, let's just send the offer. Like, rather than waste the VP's time. And if you're a VP and you like need to meet with the candidates, I think you have some control issues that you should work out in your own time. Because quite frankly, you're not going to have a lot of like day-to-day contact with that person. But also, I don't think you should be determining who works in a store that you're not managing. That's not your job, actually, at all. Your job is to manage all the regional leaders and make sure their regions are aligned with the business. And same thing, going forward. I also think it makes DMs look impotent. So like, what do you mean my boss can't choose me? They need 6 other people involved.
Yeah.
And I think it works the same for when we interview candidates under a store manager and we make them go through a lot of steps. It makes the store manager look like they actually have no power or control or say in their own team.
Right.
I mean, I've heard from peers who've been like, I really wanted that candidate and the DM kind of liked them too, but the regional said no, so I couldn't offer it. And I'm like, who are they? To me, quite frankly, even if they are not the greatest hire in their view, you're the one that has to like put in the effort.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen too, where someone's like, I think this person's too green or new or whatever. And I'm like, but what if that's the work I want to put in? Because quite frankly, sometimes building someone from the ground up is much easier than all the bad habits I'm going to break from 10 years of being a lackluster key holder somewhere. And so that's the steps of what we're going through to get people.
Yeah, to the point you just made, right? Going back to the idea of, are the right people found or are they made? Or is it kind of some combination of both? Why do you think DMs sometimes aren't empowered to hire?
I think it's actually just so everyone can like share the blame if it's not a great hire.
It's exactly
I don't
that.
think I don't think it's any less or more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And I think some DMs like that they don't have the full say because then they can sort of like pass the buck. But my challenging question back would be, what if it did all fall on you though? What would you do differently in the interviews? What would that process look like? And why aren't you just doing that? But instead, you don't have to, because we can all just go, oops, wrong person.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a reoccurring theme, shying away from empowerment because you don't have the safety in case it goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I think another reoccurring theme is you don't have the clarity on really who the company needs because the strategy isn't that visible. It isn't translated down to inform the hiring process on a store level. So it's a bit of a guessing game as well.
And I think people overvalue certain attributes of candidates and undervalue other ones. So, like, business acumen is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that that's an important skill in a candidate. In an employee, it's a super important skill and everyone better have it. But in a candidate, no, because there's a lot of people who have great business acumen and like bad manners and temperaments. Yeah, they can read a P&L and they can tell you all about how conversion and average sale and IPT all intersect and correlate and how to drive one and, you know, why another one matters more, but they suck as a human. And so and what I have found as a store manager is I often have people above me looking for people with that as a trait. And they're like, yeah, but Sally is so good with, like, she really understands the business. And I'm like, but she doesn't understand humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did we get that in the interview? Because she didn't seem like she liked people. And for me, you're not getting hired by me. I don't care what you know. And we're not, I mean, this is such an overused thing to say now in business, but like, we're really not valuing soft skills. I can't teach someone how to like humans.
Yeah.
I can teach them conversion. Let's stop acting like that's rocket science. We're not building, a nuclear weapon. We're like, if 10 people walk in and 3 of them buy, that's 30%. Like, they got it. Okay. They get it. Let's move on. If that's and I think that just goes to a lot of things that we look for in interviews. I think that we're looking for all of these like knowledge things. And yeah, does it help because someone can hit the ground running because they know all those things? Sure. But now 3 months later, you're stuck with Tom, who is bitter and angry, and he knows all the numbers, but he mumbles under his breath about how much he hates people. And that freaking customer that just came in ruined his day. But yay, he knows KPIs.
Yeah, and his are going to be crap.
Yeah. Because he doesn't understand people. But I bet you he can talk his way out of them being crap because he's smart enough to use the numbers to advantage.
Jeez. All right. So how do you weed out the Toms in your interview questions? Let's talk interview questions.
Sure. I think some of it is just really just having a real conversation with people and like dropping the corporatisms. Like, I ask all of those questions I like legally have to ask. You're welcome, lawyers. When we eventually get popular enough to have like sponsored ads, I really just at this point, it just needs to be a law firm. And so, so I ask all those questions I'm supposed to ask, but I then like sort of the last half of the interview, which for me, I do hour interviews. I just do. That's, if you're meeting with me, we're chatting for an hour. Becky's nodding knowingly for all the
know this. Yeah.
He's like, only an hour? But so my interviews last an hour. Usually I don't want to say I rush, but like the first like 25, 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, like, what's your experience? Tell me about a time when I hate behavioral interviews. I think they're overrated. I think they don't tell you anything. I think Every single person has trained themselves to be like, okay, I have a time when the customer had a problem and I solved it. Okay, I have a time when an employee was mad and then I had to make them not mad. They're ready for that like song and dance.
Yeah.
And so I go through that. And obviously, if they haven't prepared for that song and dance, yeah, that is a red flag. Because like at this point in 2025, like I will expect that you like know those things. And then after that, I start getting into like who they are as people. And for me, that's really asking like, I just ask some kind of personal questions, but not ones, don't worry, lawyers.
Your personal.
Nothing that's going to get me in trouble. I don't ask them their religion or if they're married or anything like that, but more just about like, one of the questions I love to ask people is, if you could wave a magic wand, what are you doing? And I always preface that sometimes with like, if I think they're going to answer a certain way, I'm like, I'm not saying it has to be here. Like, just literally, what are you doing? Are you on an island? Are you running a nonprofit? Are you in the arts? I think it tells me a lot about them if there are other people in that story. Are they living on an island and like they're like, and I'm just eating bonbons on an island? Or are they like doing something with people? That will tell me right there, in your perfect worlds. They don't think I'm asking about people because that's not what I'm asking.
Right.
Because the people that I found, and I'm not saying this one question gets them in my doors because it doesn't, but like the people that I found that actually care about people, people are in that story. Oh, I would take my family on so many vacations. Me and my friends would start a coffee shop with a bookstore in it. I would, create a design house where other up and coming designers could learn their craft and become better. Like all of those answers tell me that like people matter to you in some way, whether it's like a personal way, a business way, I don't really care. But like, do people matter? Because people do matter. And I need people in my building who like know that. So that's like something I ask. A lot of times I ask people about mistakes they've made, which is sometimes like a normal interview question, but also mistakes others have made and kind of see what their reaction to mistakes is. Cause like per all of our other conversations, like it's important to me to create a space where like mistakes are good. And I'm okay if someone's kind of hard on themselves, but how they respond to others is important. But yeah, it's really about digging into like, how do you ask some questions? And I think it's different in every business, but how do you ask some questions that illustrate they actually like people?
Because that's a key part of being
And
successful.
I think in retail though, it seems so obvious and stupid to say. There are a lot of people in retail who hate people, and they will tell you that it's because customers suck.
Yeah.
And it's actually because they suck. It's actually because they are burnt out. Ask me how I know. It's because they're burnt out, they're tired, they're not doing things that rejuvenate them, and they've become bitter. And there's so much of that in retail. And I've said this to DMs before and bosses I've had, and they look at me like there's a lot of things I say in the workplace that people look at me like I'm like some naive person who lives in utopia where like the grass is green and the birds are chirping and like, well, that's your fantasy land, Matt. That's not real. And it's not Fantasyland. I've had plenty of teams where almost every person on my team loves people. It just takes a lot more work to weed out all the sad sacks that have given up on humanity because there are so many of them. And because we've normalized it in retail where we're like, well, like someone's mean or nasty and someone will inevitably say, well, people just suck. We've like normalized that behavior, that conversation, that viewpoint that we almost like I think a lot of people are like, well, I can't weed that out because that's like a known quantity of almost everyone I'm going to interview. And I'm so sorry, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, and we talk a lot about how environment dictates performance too. And I think it sounds like you see that as part of your role as a store manager is to protect their love of people.
Mm-hmm.
For one, by modeling it, by talking about it, and then by protecting them. In different jobs I've had, you can have bosses that are like, yeah, people suck. That's the worst. Don't let it get to you, that kind of thing. But then you can also have managers who are like, that's not normal, right? Like that person's probably having a bad day. And I'm not trying to excuse customers' behavior at all. But I think the perspective, like who you have on your left and right shoulder greatly influences how you perceive the world. So yes, if you always have someone chirping in your ear that yes, people suck, customers are the worst, you're going to adopt that mindset. But if you have the opposite, someone grounding you and the idea that difficult customer is more of an exception and that you have a lot of lovely people and that people are inherently good, that will give you a different lens as well.
And that is the truth. And the last thing that just came to me, because I asked this question very recently. And again, I'm not afraid. And I think in business in general, we are too afraid of being like a little cheesy and a little like soft and gushy. Like it's like very not encouraged. And I'm just telling you, I will be soft and gushy till the day I die. You can't take it from me. And one of the questions I asked a candidate was, can you give me a moment recently in the last few months that made you believe in humanity? And because I wanted to know how, it actually wasn't about the answer so much, because I don't remember their answer, actually, funny enough. I just remember how fast they were to answer. And that was actually more important to me, because it wasn't like they were like, oh God, phew, yikes, humanity. This person was like, first of all, they acted like it was the most normal question I've ever asked. And that was also, I don't want to say that was like part of my weird psychology test, but like, it did help me go, okay, you're like really open and like, you're okay being vulnerable, which I think is another highly underrated quality that we should screen for. Like if you're not helping customers is vulnerable. Being with people all day, every day, coworkers is vulnerable. And if you're not going to be, because you're also going to come into customer scenarios, regardless of where you work, where you're dealing with someone who, and you don't even have to sell anything personal to do this. You don't have to work at a flower shop or a funeral home to deal with people who are grieving or having a bad day or a bad life or whatever. And how you handle that is really important to me. And if you're like a robot who hates humans, you're probably not going to deal with that well. You're going to be like, that woman just told me her husband died 2 days ago. Why'd she share that with me? Like, if that's going to be you, first of all, you can't work at a store I run because we're all crying in the back room. So about the woman and her dead husband. But anyway, I think it's like important to like try to, yes, do you have the skills? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the competence to manage a business or lead a business or even just work hourly in a business? That's all important. But also like, are you a person who is okay with other people and in fact maybe loves other people? Because I've also seen a lot of faux that in retail, which I don't appreciate, where people are like, we're here for the customer. The customer is the most important. Love the customer, the customer, the customer. And then the second that manager gets in the back room, that like mask comes off and they're like, oh. And I'm like, okay, so you don't actually like people. And that's actually more exhausting, I think. Go be an Instacart driver. Anyway, I digress.
Well, you make there's an interesting distinction in what you just said. There's the customer and then there's people, right? Like when you're just all about, yes, the customer's right, the customer's first, that sounds a little bit forced and that sounds phony. But when you realize that the customers are people, it's just it becomes a little more human.
Well, and I think also how you treat people in general and how you view people in general, if you think people suck, you're probably also one of those people that think a good majority of your coworkers suck.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to problems down the road because you're going to be that employee when I was first a store manager who comes to me and says, last night they didn't stock the straws on the condiment bar. And I'm going to look at you and I'm going to go, in the time you just told me that, you could have put straws on the condiment bar. I'll never forget that day. Mostly because I was like, why are you wasting my time with this? But it's like, those are the people that if you don't weed out, they're going to also impact the other employees' experience in the job.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like you've given us some really interesting ideas for interview questions that would out or help indicate whether or not someone is going to be happy in the industry, almost like just helping people. It sounds like there's like almost a servant mindset to like all the examples you gave, right? Would be like helping family, helping people. When I asked about, are we hiring for the company we have or the company we want? You said, we don't even hire for the company we have. We're hiring for the company we had 4 years ago. Let's say the company says, all right, store managers, this is the vision we have. This is what we know we need from our people. Here's what we need. How will this inform your hiring? We talked about the idea of building a strong talent pipeline. And so maybe asking in the interview, tell me about a skill you want to learn or a role you'd like to grow into, whether or not that's something you can provide. So that way you get to evaluate maybe their ambition, their alignment to your growth culture, their potential for internal promotion, things like that. How about something values-based? So inevitably, most of these business strategies I've seen say something like maintaining our culture, our values-based culture. What could you ask? Let's say community is a pretty given one in retail.
Mhm.
So corporate is saying, as part of our strategy, we need to make sure we have people who really care about the same values as us, especially community.
I think asking very like specific questions about how they would handle, every community has some level of diversity. And you can't ask a diversity question straight on, in my opinion. You kind of have to go a little sideways. But I think one of the, you could ask someone if a customer comes in and they speak no English, what do you do? Have you ever helped someone who's blind? Do you know what to do? First of all, I bet you most people don't know what to do. But like asking them questions that like really, because also watch their face. Like, what is their reaction when you say someone doesn't speak English and they're coming in? How are you helping them? Because that will tell you a lot right there.
Right.
Because I also think, again, shout out to the lawyers. There's the questions that have been carefully edited so that we don't ask anyone anything that could get us in trouble. There's all of the questions that we should never ask someone because we don't want to, we all have some sort of implicit bias. And we don't want to ask those questions that are going to bias us away from a candidate or toward a candidate that we shouldn't because they're too like us or whatever. But there's a huge swath of questions in between that are perfectly acceptable. And me asking someone about a park or their belief in humanity is not a legality issue. I'm not asking them about their marriage or their religion or their age or where they went to school. I'm just asking them, are you a person and do you care about the world around you? And quite frankly, to just put a super fine point on it, if the lawyers and the powers that be ever decide that those questions are not allowed because they are too personal, get me the hell out of this industry. I'm never coming back.
Fair enough. Okay, another thing that would never inevitably be on a business strategy that I'll see is something to do with the product, right? Like whether it's grocery retailer, clothing retailer, for whatever it is. Do you ask questions about the candidate's excitement, experience with passion for the product? Because
yes, every time.
Okay.
That's a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah.
And it's not that it doesn't need to even be there. They don't need to like, I'm not going to be like, sell this pen to me, but I want to know that they're here for a reason and that they can somewhat deal with is the wrong word, but they can somehow find love in what they do every day. And part of that is like, I think it will make them a better employee. And part of that is speaking from experience as someone who has worked places where they didn't love the product as much. And it's an uphill battle internally because then you have to find all these other things you love about your job.
Right.
And if you don't love the product is actually a great default to fall back on. Like corporate sucks, customers are mean to me, whatever, all of it's gone awry. But you know what? These jeans make me happy. So it also tells me about like what their research, because I don't care if they've been a customer for 20 years or like they just saw the job posting and then Googled the brand and then we're like, wow, this is actually really cool. I'm actually really intrigued. In fact, sometimes I like to have a mix of both because having that like new fresh is fun. But yeah, I always ask about the product. That's kind of a non-negotiable.
Are you always asked about the product when you interview?
Yes.
That's good.
I mean, I don't know if I've always, maybe not specifically the product. I think I'm being general when I say this, but as a store manager, you're always asked about the brand.
Okay.
I wouldn't say specifically about the product. And, they are different.
Okay. Anything else you want to touch on in terms of interviews?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, then because I think probably next time we'll talk about the idea of like pre-boarding and what happens in between acceptance and actually your first day. I guess now it's kind of just, is this the right process? I know you brought up time a couple times during this conversation.
I think that's the real crux of the issue is the speed with which we can't move. I mean, technology is supposed to make everything more efficient, faster, better, shinier. It's supposed to improve our lives. And from my perspective as a hiring manager who has lived from paper application, in my earlier career, I worked somewhere as we were transitioning to online like application. So I've actually seen the full process like change. Paper, I-9s, the legal document in the US we have to do, to now digital ones. Technology has only made the process more convoluted, longer, more frustrating, hasn't made anything easier for either side, candidate or hiring person. Because, if an hourly employee walked in even 2005, 2006, they would fill out a paper application right in front of you. You could maybe do an interview on the spot. And if it was Tuesday, you could be like, you start Friday. Bring your 2 forms of ID for that paperwork. And you're available Fridays? Yeah. Oh, your availability starts at 1? I'll see you at 1. Great. Happy to be there. Position filled. And now that same process is the candidate comes in. If they come in, we're just going to assume they come in. And then we tell them to apply online. Even if you interview on the spot, because of the online hiring software, maybe you can't have an offer that doesn't start except on a new pay period, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. So now they have to start, are you a 2-week paycheck? Oh, I'm so sorry. You can't actually start for 12 days. And if that candidate shows up in 12 days, which hopefully they do, you've now gone all of those more days without an employee. Now you still have to train them. I mean, so you're talking a month before you go from like meeting someone to like having someone that's even like somewhat proficient at anything in your business, versus 20 years ago, that same timeline could be 6 days of now they're proficient because they started on Friday. We just sent them through the weekend. They already know how to ring on the cashier. They just got their first credit card. But now in 2025, 20 years later, that boy we actually lost them. They went somewhere else. So that's what technology has done to the interviewing process. And I think I'm not against technology. I love it. I'm sitting here on my iMac with my iPhone. I have an iPad. I have a smart TV. I love it all. I have a digital camera. Give me all the tech, but make it make sense. And so I think the real question everyone has to ask at almost every level is, how do we use the tech to our advantage? And how do we go back to that faster timeline? I know there's a way. And if some IT person is going to tell me there's no way to make it happen, then we need to find new IT people. This goes back to the pressure on some of the internal corporate teams needs to be a little bit more intense. And I'm not saying your job is easy, but you need to have the same pressure that we have in the field, because I want someone in the C-suite to look at whether it be the tech team or the HR team or whoever's involved in that internal process and say, someone walks in on Tuesday and they need to start on Friday. Make it happen. Make it happen. I know it's possible because I've worked, I think, exactly one place that we could move that quickly digitally. I mean, it was still a pain. There were other problems, and we'll talk about it more when we talk about pre-boarding and onboarding, because that's where the hiccups came. But there's a way to make it happen. And we're also losing candidates because they're either going somewhere faster that can move faster, or they're going to a local business, which is fine, good for them. I love supporting local business. But as a business leader of someone who's not managing a local business, I want my candidate back. Yeah. Because those places are either still operating in paper, or because they're so small and don't have to jump through. Look for it again. I feel like we should have a little noise, we're a bad radio show with a pre-programmed keyboard. And every time I say the word lawyers, there should be a weird some sort of sound effect. But they're not dealing with that level of bureaucracy, so they can move quicker than we can. And again, just to wrap this up, it's all about how do we move quicker in this process? I think there are other things we've discussed that could be improved in terms of interview questions. And what does the application online look like? Could it be more streamlined? Do we really need people to enter their information 72 times? I think all of those are valid. But I think the bigger problem is time.
Which is wild because there's so much discussion about urgency and butts and seats and, understaffing issues and burnout and all these things. So yeah, you would think that somebody would have found a way to streamline the process at this point. But all the things that you talked about, this is just as you were speaking, your iPhone, your iMac, your smart TV, those are all very user friendly. Right? Those fulfill the needs that they do what I want them to do as a human. It sounds
Mhm.
like this process is not like user friendly, but it's not solving the problem you need it to solve
Mhm.
because it's taking too, like it's actually losing people.
The only person who's happy on this is boing is lawyers, because now I'm going to just do it. I'm going to make it a thing. The only person who's happy is because there's no missing I-9s, because when we were doing paper,
Yeah.
you had to like audit your paperwork, and if you were missing an I-9, you weren't like, following federal law, so that's obviously an issue. Or people had
Mhm.
lost paper applications and you're supposed to keep them for like 2 years or whatever it is. And so now none of that can happen. So
Mhm.
the only person getting what they want in all of this is the people who are asking retail teams to be legally compliant. So again, I will ask, like, are we retailers, or are we all just like paralegals working for lawyers?
Right. And I mean, we talked about too, right, the idea that your candidates are also your customers and that you wished that we treated candidates as like they were just as important as if they were customers. So if the candidate is the customer, is this timeline, is this experience acceptable?
No, and it's what's really interesting is I know that companies can figure it out, because here's why.
Mhm.
I've applied to brands where their application process is really convoluted, right? I have to click too many things. There's too many screens. Again, I'm not sure, like, did my application even go through? You made me attach my resume, a cover letter, and not only fill in each job and timeline, but also like basically like asked me a question that would be answered on a cover letter. So like I've double done everything. But
Mhm.
yet, and here's the thing I know about IT teams. That same IT team who worked on that built your website. Tell
Yeah.
me why your website is so user friendly. You can take my money in less than 30 seconds. Add to cart, check out. Oh, you've saved everything. You remember who I am? Love it. Um,
Yeah.
so you figured that out from a customer perspective, but from a candidate perspective, you're like, whatever, they'll figure it out. I mean, I don't even know what the argument, I don't know what's happening in the corporate office, but it's definitely not like a focus to that process. But I know it's possible because most retailers have made it incredibly easy to buy things on their website, to shop via their app.
Mhm.
Um, their mobile website looks, now we're at the point where like a lot of mobile websites look just as good as desktop websites. So you figured out all of that in these last 20 years that I'm talking about, that have been the 20 years of my retail career. But the hiring process has only gotten worse, more clunky. And to your point about like being a customer, it really just looks like there's like a dark underbelly that I don't want to know about now, because you really aren't that good of a company that I thought you were. And there have been a few of those experiences for me of applying to a company and then having such a bad experience that I'm like, oh, I will forever be tainted by knowing that this is how you operate internally, and that this is what your employees went through to get to your place of business. And
Mhm.
I think some companies are making so much money that's damage they're willing to take, you know?
Yeah, and you feel like it's tech. It's the issue of like tech limitations rather than red tape or bureaucracy, or like we said, like having to get approval from your regional or VP as opposed to just being able to pull the trigger as a DM.
I think it's both. I think it's both, and I think they're like intertwined in some ways. Because I think the bad tech actually allows for all the bureaucracy because it takes so long anyway. So they're like, well, it's not the bureaucracy holding it up, because the computer, it takes the candidate some time to get the email, and then they have to fill out the thing. So like they have to wait anyway. Like it's like one excusing the other. And then it's like, well, we don't need faster tech, because then the VP would have to move faster in interviewing the candidate. Like the two are like, one's a barnacle on the ship of the other, really.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you could rebuild the hiring process, as I'm saying it out loud, I think you've already answered it from scratch. What would you change? And it sounds like it would be faster and more agile.
Exactly. And I also think like, I think retail, on my best days where I give people the most credit, and again, ask me on a different day, I might have a different answer, but on the days where I'm willing to give people more credit, I think that a lot of people would love the sound of this, even at the highest levels. I think a lot of people just don't know where to start or what to do first,
Yeah.
or whose job it is to fix it. And I think I think me and you have talked about this like sort of offline. Someone would kind of have to make something like this their pet project.
Yeah.
Like some VP somewhere would just have to decide that this is like the hill they will literally die on. And like they will go full scorched earth until it's fixed. Because otherwise, whose job is it? Because there's too many hands in the pot. It's IT, it's hiring, it's HR, it's a VP, it's the C-suite, it's the store level. Like, it's kind of like everyone owns it and no one owns it. And when that happens, accountability can't happen and then nothing can change. And then we all just get to stare at each other, complain about it, and then inevitably just go, well, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, you see different titles these days, but they're increasingly, directors of employee experience or something like that. I've never seen like a director of a candidate experience, but I think that speaks to the idea of when we first started in the arena of employer branding, we always wondered why so many people lived in the talent acquisition space and just in recruitment and marketing, and no one was addressing the retention issue so much. And I think that was because it was easier to speak to the problems of those people because there are people directly in charge of talent acquisition and you can help them solve their very unique siloed problem. There's no director of retention.
Mm-hmm.
There's no VP of retention. And so that buck, like you just said, gets passed around. It's kind of everyone's job. If it's everyone's job, it's no one's job.
Exactly. And I think it goes back to a lot of people, because there are a lot of things in retail. And I said this, I think it was our last episode where I basically said to you, a lot of people are going to be like, they're going to say all sorts of things about you for asking me a question that was perfectly valid. But in retail, there are a lot of things like this process where people just go, well, it's like this everywhere. So like, Matt, why are you complaining about it? Because this just like kind of is what it is. And I am kind of shocked, honestly, at people's okayness with the mediocrity of certain things in retail, considering their love and passion for reaching the highest levels of other spheres, whether it be diversity or values or just performance or stock performance. And they're like, we are the best. We are number one. And then when it comes to certain things like retention or candidate experience or the interview process, they're like, yeah, we suck, but so does everyone else. So that's okay. And I'm like, come on. Like, don't you want to be number one in that too? Wouldn't it be great to be like, not only are we great to work with for, and we have like the best shareholder value return, but also our candidates get the smoothest, easiest experience one could ever imagine.
Yeah. And stay customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to leave it. Those probably were them. Any other final thoughts?
No, that's it.
Appreciate it as always.
Thank you, you too.
You're listening to Dear Corporate, Love Stores.